Hi, everyone. Good morning. Happy Friday. Or I guess if you're in another part of the country, maybe it's another day. I don't know yet. Good morning. I'm so happy you are here today. I am Carrie Stober, obviously not Eric Rhodes. He is hosting our Art Business Mastery Day event today. So I get to fill in for you, and I'm super excited. I have an artist that I discovered on Instagram joining us today, and I loved her art and so happy that she agreed to come on today. So I am going to, not even delay anything. I'm just going to go ahead and bring her in. Hello,
Hi,
Elo.
Carrie.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thanks
Elo,
for having
where are you
me.
calling in from?
Portland, Oregon.
Oh,
Yep.
nice. I've never been up that way.
Well,
I hear it's rainy a lot.
it's raining right now. I had to redo all my lights because it was so dark this morning.
Well, everyone, this is Elo Wobig. She is going to be joining us today for the show. I'm super excited. Elo, what are you going to share with us today?
So I'm going to talk about how to paint rocks above and below water. And that's because I tend to paint landscapes and I like having the foreground in it. And I realized that I just can't shoot from the hip when it comes to painting rocks. So I spent some time kind of looking into that, and I hope to share that with you in gouache. So,
Perfect. Well, wonderful. Let's go ahead and get this show started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhodes.
Carrie Stober. Happy Friday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carrie Stober, Marketing Project Manager, Art Competition Manager here for Streamline, and I am filling in for Eric, who is hosting our Art Business Mastery Day today. And with us today, we have Elo Wobig, who I am super excited about. I discovered her on Instagram several months ago, actually, and I've just been following her and her gouache painting. And so I am going to bring her in and we're going to get started with this show. Okay,
Great.
Elo, take it away.
That look great. Okay, so I'm going to start out by showing you how I start this painting. Then I'll go over some visual cues about rocks above and below water. And if we have time, I'll see how far I get. So here I already have taped it off. This is gouache 8 by 8 inches on hot press paper. I did an initial wash of yellow ochre, and then I did a sketch already to save some time.
Awesome.
And because this scene is about the foreground, I really thought about like how I wanted to arrange the rocks. And compared to the reference photo that I gave you, I decided to do a square format. So I like to work from background to foreground, and I want the most beautiful chromatic colors to be here in the foreground, so I will subdue the background. I don't know how much you can see of my palette,
Yeah, we
but
can see it.
okay, great.
Is that a sky blue you're using?
Okay, so what I've done, and this is a great hint, is that I took a lot of the basic colors here and I tinted it down with white because
Oh, that's smart.
it really helps because like when you're in a hurry, the white is so necessary in gouache painting that this just kind of like gets you halfway there already so that you're not having to tint it down too much. Okay. I have it kind of watery at the beginning, so yeah. I'm just going to go in with my flat 2-inch or 1-inch brush, quite watery at the beginning. And I realized my sky will need to be lighter in that first layer. It's quite watery and additive. The reason why I did the wash in the bottom is because it's really hard when you want to get that lightest value in gouache to keep the chroma, to keep the color.
Yeah.
And so this will allow me to use the transparency when I use it very, very thin to keep that yellow ochre in the picture.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, what kind of paper did you say you were using?
Hot press. Yeah, hot press. I like hot press because it's smooth and therefore it dries a little faster. When it dries faster, then I can move on. Like, that's why I pre-did that other part, is because I just didn't want to wait.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't used a hot press, but I've heard a lot of people recommend it for gouache.
Yeah. So I want this to be more muted than that, but not quite so dark. Yeah. Nice thing about a big brush is you can get a lot more done in a small amount of time. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do, just sort of figure out the shadow of the trees already. Boop. See what happens? Like, it looks really light here, but when you put it on paper, it already is quite dark.
Yes, that's what I have found. So I'm normally a pastel artist. So when I first started
Mm-hmm.
playing with gouache, I could not figure out the values because sometimes what you're mixing on the palette does not look the same on the paper. And then when it
Yep,
dries on the paper, sometimes it dries darker or lighter. It's such a
exactly.
finicky little thing.
It is. You kind of have to get the hang of it, a lot more practice. And still, like, I find that I primarily paint in oils, and then when I haven't for a while, I go, oh my gosh, I completely forgot about this, this phenomena. Okay. So this grayish color will basically be the shadow of everything else, which I have now. Okay, I'm not going to deal with this right now. I'm going to lay in the water. So one thing to know about water is, and this will have to be lighter. Let's see, let me get lighter. Yeah. Okay. When it's wet, it's kind of nice because you could keep
Adding to it.
adding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem I have with gouache is because I live in
Mm-hmm.
Colorado, it is incredibly dry here.
Yeah.
Everything dries so fast. So I've been trying to figure out how I can get everything to dry a little slower when I'm working the way that you're working.
Yeah. I hear you. In really dry climates, it's definitely a challenge. You could mist your paper more often, I think. That might do it. You're gonna have to. Well, the other thing I did with my paints, you can see they kind of leveled off a little bit. So I kind of pre-mix water in there, so it's a more liquidy
Mhm.
consistency instead of straight out of the tube. Okay. So what I was going to say is, in the distance, it's reflecting the sky, but in the foreground, it's becoming more and more shallow and transparent. And so therefore, it's warmer here and cooler here.
Right.
So I'm going to do this. Let me see if I can do this in a fell swoop. So
What size flat are you using?
it's an inch. Yeah. Okay. We're going to go in. Yep. And I normally would. Okay. All right. Let's see how I'm going to be adding more kind of this greenish. It's actually a tinted Viridian. I'm going to try to keep my above ground rocks unpainted, again, using the transparency of the paint. Okay, needs to go lighter. The problem is when you go lighter, it often gets cooler instead of warmer, so you have to really be aware of that happening by adding in little bits of yellow. maybe not quite so soon. It's a back and forth process.
Yeah. I love that teal in there.
Yeah. Part of the reason why I love painting water is because I love blue so much.
Yeah.
So this area, I don't want to be too careful because these are actually below water rocks, but I just indicated it for my own sake. If I'm outside, it's pretty variable how much I'm going to draw. I just want to cover this whole thing up. It's kind of like a massive block in. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, now it's time to get a little more yellow in there. Trying to keep it in the blue family. Oops, probably should have used the tinted one. Here's the other thing I do. I keep my white in a bottle. Again, it's just because I don't
Do
want
you
it to
have
get
that watered down too to make it come out
Yep.
of? Oh, okay, that's smart because that's the one thing I hate about white in gouache is it comes out so thick.
Yep, it's watered down, and I put a little bit of peroxide in it to keep all my gouache from growing mold.
Oh, I hadn't thought about peroxide. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Well, you know, back in the day when everybody was making hand sanitizer, when we ran out of that for COVID, the World Health Organization said add peroxide to your hand sanitizer for that reason. So I thought, oh, it works for that, you know, it works for mold. So it worked. Anyway, okay, so now I have a gradation, and I know where all my above rocks are. I could put in a little bit more green into the trees. Oops, that's too green.
Mhm.
Okay, here we go. Let's just do a little bit here and just get an idea that it's try to vary the colors a little bit.
And I'm sorry, I think I was a little distracted when you were first talking at the beginning. When you put in your yellow ochre, did you put gesso in it as well, or just straight yellow ochre?
Oh, I did not do gesso. Although lately I've done that, and I do like that surface. I think I'm going to play around with that a little bit more.
One of the artists that I had on earlier this week, Bernard Delario, was talking about he has been gessoing everything, and I had never thought about that before. So I've got lots of learning and experimenting this week.
And it's great to learn from other artists because we don't all have the answers for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of problems that we're working out, and all of us are trying to figure it out. It's great to get even just a few tips from your friends or like watching these videos. Okay. All right. Now, okay, I'm struggling to get the right color here because you can see how it modifies it so much. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little bit of this reflection in the water. Try to go a little bluer, a little bluer. Okay, here we go. So again, so all I'm looking at here, I'm not looking at my photo reference. I'm just looking at what I've done up here, and I'm just going to mimic it. Oop, it's a little bright. I'm just going to try to copy what's there. And that's about it, because I can always go over it later. Oh, why did I do that to myself? I put a rock right in the middle, so it just made it harder. Okay. And this it's drying fast for me today, so there we go. So I'm just imagining this horizon line, and it just has to be completely mirrored. All right, so now we've done enough of the background. Like normally I would do more, but we'll just try to keep up with speed here. So I want to tell you how to paint the rocks. In painting the rocks, I made this little diagram for you. And that's because there are rocks above water, below water. So in the rocks above water, they behave like how you would think an apple or in a still life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a roundness to it. You want to show where the light source is coming and where the shadow is. And because of this interplay between the light and the shadow, you know that the object is round. Now, most rocks aren't usually round. They're usually a lot more angular, but these rocks in this area in Tahoe is actually quite round. So this is what it would look like if the object were sitting on top of a blue surface, and it would cast a shadow, and where the light hits, it would be lighter, and where the shadow is, it would be darker blue. And the deepest occlusion shadow would be a warmer area. So that's what I tried to show you here. Now, if a rock is below water, the whole thing would be kind of cast in a bluish greenish hue. And it's blue because water filters out the yellow and red wavelengths, and so that's why water looks blue. And therefore, the other thing to notice is that the value, the lightness and darkness of it is much reduced. So where you might have a highlight, there is no highlight here, and where you have a deep shadow, it's not quite as dark. Now, these little lights are called, these streaks of light are caused from waves where the light waves have bent from like waves above and they converge together, but in still water, you're really not going to see any highlights at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's an example where the object is above and below water, and you can see that above water, it looks like this, and below water, you have really a flattening of really just two values. And across this is where the water meets, and water has adhesive properties. That's why it sticks to a straw or kind of flips up the side of a glass, and it's called the meniscus. And the nice thing about the meniscus is it kind of, we know visually like this is water. So you don't have to make a straight across, but indicating some of that there is really nice, is a nice visual cue. And then finally, this one here is like if this rocks are porous and they absorb water. So here the rock is wet on the bottom, maybe because the lake was a higher level earlier and now it's receded. So this wet border here is going to be darker in value, more saturated in color, and still obey the ball rules. And it may have some highlights because it's wet. So that's a lot to talk about when I'm demoing. That's why I decided to do this.
That's fantastic information. Would you mind sending us that handout so we can post it in the chat on the replay?
Okay, sure.
That would
And
be
also,
awesome.
and that's not all the rocks there is, because there are rocks that are in shadow and then reflecting. So there's a lot of different situations. Okay, so now we're going to tackle all the rocks that are in the light first, just completely above. And so to do that, I want a gray. I'm just gonna, and this is another situation where you see like, wow, like, oh, I'm gonna use a smaller brush, where this already looks so light, but it's just not gonna be light enough. Okay. I want to like add some variability in color. Oh, I know what I was going to do. I was going to do the shadows first. So let's do that first. Okay, back to the shadow. The shadow is the same all around. It's this bluish grayish that's in the back. Okay. So let's see here. So there's areas. See, if the sun is coming from this way, I'm going to think of the shadows on this side of the rock. And I'm probably am going to modulate this later, but this gives me a head start to think about where my rocks are in shadow. Okay, and this rock here. I'm going to just try to do it as fast as possible. Okay. And yeah, these things here. There's these rocks here are also somewhat sitting in shadow. You know, we're going to think about the variations. Let's see. Okay. To be honest, each of these shapes, like if I were really painting it well, I would be carefully considering how they look. But right now, it's about to be. Okay. Now that I've done that, now I'll go back into making rocks look like rocks. And not, okay, here we go. This one in particular. So I'm keeping my paints fairly transparent. But I'm trying to use dry brush to make it give some texture. Okay.
I definitely need to try the dry brush technique. I have not done that yet, and every time I've seen someone use it, it looks so cool.
It's actually not that hard. What I'm doing, what you can't see because it's off camera, is that I'm just like drying my brush like as I would in an oil painting during the process. So then I am going, you know, barely. In fact, I've just dried my brush here and I haven't even done anything else. There's just so much paint in my brush that it's still here. Okay. Okay. Oh, forgot to do these guys. Okay. Okay. I'm going to think about the wet side. Or, I'm sorry, the light again. Okay. So now I've done all the rocks that I want to do above the water, and you know, more can always be done, like highlights and stuff. We're going to skip that. Now I'm going to do the rocks below water. Rocks below water are mostly that teal color. So we're going to go back to that. And they're the warm red, but I don't know. Can you see where I'm mixing here?
Yeah.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very muted teal.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for, is something that is still, it's like warm, but it's not that warm. It's like teal, but not that teal. And it's a little darker. Let's see how that goes. I have my paint kind of wet right now, and when it's really wet, that's a time where it's hard to tell what exactly that value is.
Right.
It's best to not get it too wet. Let's see. That's probably too cold. Okay. This is probably going to be too warm. Okay, let's see how dark that dried?
Yes.
That already shows you. So now I don't know what is happening here because I haven't spent enough time in Tahoe to know, but these rocks have this weird like base underwater. So I'm just going to put in the rocks below, kind of in a pattern of what's going on here. I'm literally just going to fill it in. So that I know what's going on. I'm trying to convince myself. Okay. Okay. And then as the rocks are going out in the distance, they fade because the water gets deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to actually use the less paint in terms of wet paint. Let's see, is it even necessary to do that? Okay, good enough. All right. Oh, here's some more right here.
So when you do the dry brush technique, do you wipe your brush off on a paper towel or something first and then get paint on it?
Yes, I'll be honest. When I'm painting, I'm really unaware of what I'm doing. And so sometimes like shooting a video helps me see like, what did I do here? I don't even know. So, yeah. Okay, we're just gonna, you know what? It's a form of, it's just experimentation because the more you do it, the more you, I don't know. I honestly, this is what I was most scared about this demo is because I don't know what I do. I don't know exactly how I got there sometimes. Okay, so now we're gonna go, we've done a little bit. I know this doesn't look very convincing, and that's because they do have to have form, and as I showed you before, there are two values, and so the shadow is a darker blue. So that's what we're gonna do, is find the shadow, which is kind of like that color, darker blue. And if we have the darker blue shadow, it will look, we don't want too dark. Ugh. Okay, I'm going to put it over here because okay. All right, here we go. Oh, not dark enough. Okay. This is one of the things you want to do is think about things flattening out in the distance and okay. This is a very strange rock, I will say. This one is hard to tackle because I don't even know how to explain it. Part of it is it's in the shadow, and then it's above water and below water, and there's a reflection of light there, so it's very, very confusing. But for all the other ones, they sort of obey the same rules that I was telling you about, that the shadow and having this shadow edge seats, probably don't want to go out that far because again, it's too deep to actually appreciate all that. Okay. See how you can erase with just a wet brush. There might be some here. Okay. Okay. You start noodling and you realize I'm using a tiny brush. Okay, I'm going to cover that up. The other things that are that deep blue is when the water is deep. So near this rock, the water is quite deep, so it has that blue appearance. Okay. I'm going to deal with that later. All right. The reason why this looks so wonky right now is because the ones that are, oh, and also the ones that are above water have not such defined edges. What you can also do is to soften these edges here.
So did you just dip that in a little bit of water?
Yes, that's exactly. Just kind of loosen that up a little bit. It doesn't look so well defined. Okay. All right. So now we're going to do the transition. And as I mentioned before, the transition is darker at the edge. And these rocks look like they're kind of a dark green. And they have a light side and a dark side. This is just black and yellow ochre. So okay. All right, I'm going to look at this one here. And it has the base of this rock where it's wet. And let's see what, okay, let's use this one. This one on the dark side. As it goes further back, it's probably not quite as dark, but so I'm saying that's the shadow side of my rock. And this one. And then when it gets to the light side, it's the same color, warmer, and let's see. That one's not quite warm enough. Let's see what other rocks are above water. There's that one, this one here, this one. Okay. And I would want to make it a little smoother. Is this okay? So see, this is already looking kind of like it's above the water.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a little bit more of an edge here. And remember I talked about that little meniscus. You don't have to put it everywhere, but you could do that, and that will give you an indication that, hey, we're above water. I need to do it again down here. Where my other brush go? Okay, here it is. In the foreground, of course, it's very shallow. You're going to be able to see color a lot better. It's going to be a lot warmer. There's less light absorption from the water itself, so you're going to see a little bit more like reds and stuff. Okay. The design of rocks. This, you could sit here and play with rocks all day. All right. Okay. Here the all right. Here's, yeah, this is what I wanted to show you is like if you have a little meniscus. It dried already. That's the thing with gouache. It dries so fast. It just kind of feels like it's on on the water already, just with that. Okay. Now it's, let's see, how are we doing? We did the water, so we did the wet edge, we did and then it's more refinement at this point. This is very, very rough, but the rest of it is just like, oh, I know what I need to do. This is really, so this rock here is above water and it's casting a shadow, and it actually has the area of the darkest dark. So let's get that in. Okay.
We've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay. 15 minutes. So this is, I'm trying to show this is a cast shadow. So even there's the darkness of the cast shadow and then what's in the light. All right. Oops. Once again, went too far. Well, do you have any questions for me in the meantime as I'm doing this?
No, I'm just watching you and just
Okay.
mesmerized by everything coming together.
I hope it is. Okay. Ooh, a little more color.
So if you were not doing this for Art School Live, how long would it normally take you to make this painting?
Maybe a couple hours. And the thing is, like, to prepare for this, I'm just going to be fully honest here. I painted it again, and I just wanted to be confident. And a lot of painting, you're just trying to figure out what's going on in the picture. And so once you do it the first time, then you've kind of solved the problems, and then it makes it sometimes it makes it less exciting, and sometimes it just makes it so that you're more confident, so you could be bold in your brush strokes, right?
Right.
All right. These rocks don't look very defined, the above rocks, but I don't want to work on those right now.
Okay. Gail is asking, does the green indicate moss?
You know, it can algae. It's not something that I'm just painting what I think is there, actually there.
Right.
And so to a certain degree, I'm just when I paint, I always like to make it look like, to some people, like, oh, that's kind of what it looks like. And every region has, has a different look. So for example, you can't paint all trees looking the same. You can't paint all rocks looking the same, because
Right.
regionally they are different. And so this area regionally, usually green in water, I will say, is algae. When you can't see in the water, it's because it's algae. So that's a good point. Yeah. All right. And then I'm just making up rocks here. I shouldn't have made it so. There we go. Okay. If I had all the time in the world, I would, refine these things more. Make my shadow. There, I did kind of like make, having some bases with shadow helps seat things. In its place. Okay. Oh, here's another rock. I forgot about that. Okay. Oh, the other thing is in this particular picture, there's always, this is not the object of this lesson, but there is like reflected light off of the rocks, so you can do that as well to kind of, again, everything you can, using all your tricks to tell people that this is water, and the horizontal lines do that for you, right? Cutting through that.
So you did that perfectly. You did it in such a way, because someone else was mentioning in the chat about the white lines, being a little too busy in the foreground, but you kind of mixed that in with some of the other colors you have to kind of tone that down a little bit, and it makes it look a lot more believable, and also less busy.
Say that again. Which one are you saying? This thing?
Yeah, the lines that you put in, the white lines that you put in, you mixed it and toned it down, because we were talking in the chat about how, when you put those white lines on water, sometimes it can be distracting in the foreground.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But you mixing it down a little bit, I always do white, and it does end up looking really bad. And so you did it in such a way that it's believable and it doesn't distract.
I think part of the reason why is that if you look at my reference, and squint down, the rocks are the lightest, highest value in the picture, and not the reflection. And whenever you have a reflection, it cannot be as bright as the object itself, because the object is reflecting the light back to you. The water is receiving the light from the rock to the water and then reflecting back to you. And from that alone, it's attenuated, right? So that's why. And since, here I was just going to show you, like, since I did not use my whitest white, I can now use that to go one step higher in my rocks, right? And
that looks great. That just added so much depth.
Yeah, like I said, these rocks I could sit here and play with rocks for a long time. Just go, oh, I wanna, and all I'm doing is I'm using my leftover paint, and dry brush is great for this, right? Just get some texture. That brush is too small for this. Okay. If I don't show you the whole thing, I'll show you like where we are at the end. I want my brush strokes to kind of go in the same, I want to feel the roundness of the rock and kind of go, see what happened? I was using white on a dirty brush and it came out dark. This is what happens. That's why having this squeeze thing is so helpful. There we go. It's there. Okay, more. Barely touch it in there. Get as much as I can. Same idea here. Okay. Oh, this was supposed to be a dark rock. That's okay. We will go back, use our leftover paint. Cover that up. This was rock in the sun. There we go. And this rock does not look very convincing because it doesn't have the shadow as in the dry brush. Hold on. That shadow color is that muted blue. You know, this is how you ruin your brushes. You try to go over a dried area and you reconstitute the paint. Then you have ruined your brush. Okay, let's see if I can still. Oh well, I didn't get quite a dry enough brush there, so that's why it's not looking so. All right. Well, I tell you what, this is a start, is what I would say. There's so much more to do. I will just show you.
That's how much you can get done in 40 minutes.
Oh my gosh, there's just too much here to do because you can just keep going here, but I will show you how much time do we have?
You have about 10 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Should I keep going?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. I think this area, it looks not as warm as I want it to go. So I'm going to repaint that area then and get a better color. Let's see if I can warm it up a little bit. You can negative paint too, back and reshape your rocks. Yeah.
We've got someone in the chat named Sasha. She said, I lived at Lake Tahoe and this expresses the nature there so well.
Aw. Thanks, Sasha. I'm going to go over some of the rocks a little bit to not make it so apparent. The hard thing about redoing a background is that you have to be really committed to keep going because look what happened there.
Yeah.
That's okay. But then if we're afraid to do it, then we're never gonna, it's better to get it right than to be afraid. Oh, the very dark parts. I never did that. Yep. Let's do that last bit before I show you.
It's impressive how far you make a dot of paint go. Well, I think it helps too. So you said you added a little bit of water to each of your pots. So that helps. And then you're adding water as you're mixing too. So you really are making it go a long way. I go through so much paint.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I am not skilled at mixing yet.
Yeah. I think that I just realized my darkest darks aren't in, and therefore it looks quite wonky. I know you've heard this said before, but water management is so important in gouache painting. So that is something that you have to, the way I think about painting is that you have to master the material. And I'm not saying I'm a master because I feel like I'm always learning, but you want to get to a point where you're not thinking about what you're doing and you're just thinking about your picture. So for example, like if you're riding a bike and you had to think like, I'm pedaling one leg now and now the other one, it's very hard to do. But the water management is really important and I think that's why I can use a lot less paint. It looks like I'm using less paint, mainly because I'm just trying to do dry brush. Then I have the wet washy areas. I tend to paint a lot wet and washier than a lot of other painters, I think.
But I like seeing that though, because I know for me, when I'm by no means proficient in gouache. I've just started playing with it. And I've learned that I need to work on paper, not on canvas, because I've been working on gessoed canvas. And I had in my mind that I had to like, because there is a little bit of tooth with that gesso in that canvas, like I've got to fill that tooth. And so I was a ton of paint. And watching how you're doing this, I'm realizing, and actually, who is it? It's Judd Mercer's the same way, more water and thinner layers underneath, and then you build on top of it.
Yeah. One of the things is that's why I like the cold press paint, cold press paper, because it's not as absorbent. I actually don't like the watercolor paper. It's so absorbent.
Yes.
I have a friend, Susan Hall. She's great at gouache, and she puts down a very thin layer of acrylic wash, like as an underpainting, and she uses and she uses that paper, the expensive kind of papers, here I am painting and not being able to talk. Watercolor paper, and that I realize is because it does reduce the absorbency. That's what you're,
I learned that I went plein air painting and I was like, I'll try gouache. That can't be that hard. I grabbed these canvas panels that someone gave me, and oh my gosh, it was so difficult because A, you're in Colorado, it's dry, and B, I did not realize that they soak up so much of the paint. So I was mixing constantly and adding more, and it was just crazy. I didn't realize that you do need to cover it with either gesso or acrylic something so that it's not soaking up everything.
Yeah.
See, learning so much. I love it. I love it.
I love Colorado. I was just there with my husband, and what an amazing state.
Where did you guys go?
Well, we started in New Mexico, drove up from there, and then caught the fall color, which is spectacular.
Yeah, we've got some good fall color.
And then went to Colorado Springs, saw, the Garden of the Gods. Truly impressive place.
Yeah, it's beautiful there.
Oh my gosh.
Is Colorado Springs the furthest north you went?
We did not go too much into Denver, I'm afraid. So it'll have to be another trip. It's so pretty there. Yeah.
I'm almost to the Wyoming border, so complete opposite side of the state. But the mountains up by, you go by Estes Park, it's really pretty. The mountains up I-70 is really gorgeous. There's really not a bad place in Colorado.
Oh my gosh. If only I had known I would have moved there.
While Elo is putting the finishing touches on her painting, I'm going to share her website in the chat. Be sure to check her out. Follow her on Instagram. You'll get to see a lot of amazing paintings on Instagram. And then we do have Watercolor Live coming up at the end of the month. We don't have any gouache in that event, but I am trying to convince the team to do a gouache event. So be on the lookout for that.
I'm not going to consider this done, but I'll take off the tape because it always looks better with the tape. And then I'll show you.
We did have somebody who asked if you would take the tape off. It's so sad.
I am at the point where I am kind of dinking around a little bit, so it's best to stop and evaluate. And then when you're painting in a hurry for a demo, there's not much time for evaluating. So let's take off the tape and see. I don't know. Does it look like it's got rocks above water and below?
Yes, it does. You can totally. I love it. And like I said, those lines that you put in, just very subtle, added to it, and it's great. And that lower left side with all of the green and the underwater shadow, like it looks really good.
Cool.
You did
Well,
such a good job.
thank you. I mean, I think the sky, to be honest, this needs to be lighter. I can show you a practice one. How different does this look?
You definitely had a lot more time on that one.
Yeah. And I think it's there. So it's mostly there. Yeah, these little spaces here look kind of funny. It kind of looks like there's a sunrise coming above that. So I think that's another
It looks like
place that
rain clouds with some light behind it.
yeah. Yeah, it's not bad, right? Like sometimes you're like, oh, I want to fix that. It's more like Portland right now. This is what it looks like for us.
Well, Elo, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This was wonderful. I'm so glad you came on board. And they mentioned in the chat that you've got a YouTube channel as well with lots of videos.
Yeah, I have a few. I have to admit, it's mostly, if you want to find most of my stuff, it's probably best on Instagram. I mostly do the reels, and then I will kind of repost those things on YouTube. But
Yeah.
I don't tend my YouTube channel very well. But yep, it's there. It's easier to find videos there. And thank you for noticing that, because maybe I'll do a better job of feeding that channel. Yeah.
There you go. Well,
Yeah.
thank you everyone for watching. Thank you to Elo for joining us today. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and be sure to tune in next week. I will be guest hosting again. I'm super excited about that. I'm going to have a couple more gouache artists on, as well as some acrylic and pastel. So be sure to check that out. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you can be alerted when we go live like this. So thank you guys all so much, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, Elo.
Thanks for having me.